Why are mass killings so prevalent in our society? Hello, I'm Dr. Jory Goodman, a neuropsychiatrist who practiced in Beverly Hills for more than 45 years. Today, we are going to explore the increased frequency of these horrific acts, the reasons they might happen, and the killers themselves. I'm the Beverly Hills Shrink. Let's begin your session. Throughout my professional career as a neuropsychiatrist and psychopharmacologist, I've treated numerous murderers, rapists, and other high-risk individuals. And while they're not mass killers, they may give me some insight into what goes on with these people. When it comes to mass killings, we need to understand that there's a difference between singular homicides and mass murders. Singular homicides are acts of aggression or violence that result in the death of another person. Typically, these are spontaneous events, but they may be premeditated as well. Mass killings are defined by the FBI as the murder of 4 or more people in the same place and time before the killer has a cooling off period. This is often in a vulnerable area with easy access where there are many potential victims. It should be mentioned that most of these occurrences happen in weapon-free zones. These differ greatly from singular homicides. Although one might spontaneously carry out a mass killing, they are usually meticulously, carefully, and obsessively planned. So why are these mass killings becoming more frequent? To answer that, it might benefit us to study a few of these heinous crimes that have occurred. A word of warning: the topics covered in this discussion will be very graphic, violent, and disturbing. Out of a list of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, we will take a close look at 4 of them. Columbine, 1999. Aurora Theater shooting, 2012. Sandy Hook Elementary, 2012. Robb Elementary School, 2022. The Columbine shooting was arguably the first mass murder to get mass media coverage, carried out by 2 students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. We can see 5 videotapes, personal journals of theirs, chronicling the reasoning, preparation, and aspirations of these 2 leading up to the attack. In a journal, Harris wrote, "Dreaming of going on a shooting spree with Klebold, they expressed the desires to rape and torture women. They spoke of their upcoming massacre as being a day that will be remembered forever." Prior to the shooting, a classmate's parents notified the local sheriff department. This was of a troublesome internet post by Harris, where he stated he wanted to kill and injure, quote, "as many of you as I can," close quote. An affidavit for a search warrant of Harris's home was drafted, but it was ultimately not given to a judge, and nothing came of it. The 2 students went on to kill 13 people. After the shooting, they both killed themselves. What is the psychological reasoning behind this? There are numerous factors that lead up to these killings. Many of them will be seen in each of the ones we discuss. We see here pathological narcissism. Narcissists tend to be omnipotent. They know better than everybody else. They don't like to be at the end of the line. They don't like to be excluded. When this happens, they become enraged. Some of them become violent spontaneously in the schoolyard, the street, at the ball game. Others, like these 2, get together and plan meticulously cold-blooded murder. As we go along, we're going to see these characteristics throughout all of the killers. In the Aurora Theater killing, 24-year-old James Holmes entered a midnight screening of a Batman movie and killed 12 people. CBS News has since reported that Holmes met with at least 3 mental health professionals at the University of Colorado before the killings took place. One of them was told by Holmes that he planned to kill people. She didn't want to get him committed because she thought he was just borderline, and committing him would upset him, make him angry. Commitment in this context means to be committed to a facility on usually a legal hold with loss of civil rights for a certain period of time while you are being assessed. BuzzFeed has posted images of Holmes' private notebooks where he questioned the value of life, self-diagnosed himself as schizophrenic, autistic, and psychotic. He addressed himself as having a broken mind.
Can a person have both no value and be ultimately good and or ultimately evil? The real me is fighting the biological me. And finally, the last escape, mass murder at the movies. Obsession onset more than 10 years ago. So anyways, that's my mind. It's broken. I tried to fix it.
He sent the notebook to a former psychiatrist of his just before the massacre. What is the psychological reasoning behind these actions? Well, again, we have a very disgruntled person, a misfit, not engaged in activities on his own, brooding. He was aware that he had problems, and in some ways, he was proud of it. That's the pathological narcissism. He thinks he has a broken mind, but he also thinks it's okay to kill a bunch of people. With respect to Holmes' self-diagnoses, schizophrenia is a serious mental illness. It has many forms, but it's characterized usually by hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, deterioration in self-care. It's treated with antipsychotic medications. Psychosis is a broad term, too broad to define here, but it does include schizophrenia. Autism is a developmental disorder. Many autistic people are very high functioning, but loners. They don't read people's signals well. They don't tend to make friends. They tend to be made fun of when they're younger because they just can't get what's going on around them, and they become angry. To be clear, just because you might have one of these stated disorders, schizophrenia, autism, psychosis, ADHD, depression, doesn't mean that you're going to become a mass killer. Next, we will look at the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre. The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was carried out by 20-year-old Adam Lanza. He shot and killed his own mother before going on his rampage. He drove to the school, killing 26 people, most of whom were young children. He killed himself after the attack. Prior to this, when Adam was younger, he was seen by the New Hampshire Birth to 3 intervention program. He was referred for special education preschool services. He was diagnosed with sensory integration disorder. When he was 13, he was seen by a psychiatrist and diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. With respect to sensory integration disorder, it's somewhat difficult to diagnose, and I think overdiagnosed. It has to do with people being unable to tolerate their own sensations. Simple examples would be the tag inside of a t-shirt enrages or terrifies the person. They can't tolerate that sensation. That's sensory integration disorder. Asperger's syndrome is a developmental disorder. Until recently, it was a standalone diagnosis. It was a description of a high-functioning autistic individual who could go to school. They're usually very smart. They can succeed, but only in a solitary manner, often having no friends, no relationships, but they can be geniuses at whatever they do. Now, it's considered in the autistic spectrum disorder, and the specific name has been dropped by some people, but not by all of us. After the massacre, Lanza was found to be obsessed with school shootings. He had clippings of a story in the New York Times that detailed a man who killed school children back in 1891. Information found online shows, quote, he had cut off contact with both his father and brother in the 2 years before the shooting, and at one point communicated with his mother, who lived in the same house, only by email. A document titled, quote, Selfish, describing Lanza's belief in the inherent selfishness of women, was found on his computer after his death.
After reading that a female who was shot by George Sedini repeatedly exclaimed, "Get me out of here, he's going to kill me," after having been shot, I thought it was absurd that she did not realize it was an attack against a group of the aggregate rather than someone having a personal vendetta against each person, although she was specifically only thinking of herself and not of others at the time.
What is the psychological reasoning behind his actions? A characteristic of Asperger's people is that they're loners. They really don't have friends. They don't join clubs. They don't have girlfriends. They like to sit before computers or computer games. There are many exceptions to that description. These folks can have girlfriends, get married, have families, work in companies, but again, they tend to be standalone individuals for the most part. If we talk about his relationship with his mother and killing her, that actually gets Freudian if we want to go there. We don't know the nature of the relationship with his mother, but it was clearly disturbed. I can't comment specifically, but she sheltered him from the authorities, from the counselors, for a very long time. He was kept away from treatment. He insisted that the other men in the family leave. Father and brother left 2 years before this. So he had his mother all to himself. How that worked out internally, we don't know. But clearly, he had growing resentment and anger. And in most families, the first and safest target for a child to be angry at is mother, because mother is the most tolerant, loving person in the family. Well, he took his anger out on his mother permanently. His issue with the inherent selfishness of women probably has to do with the nature of their too close relationship. I infer, but can't say certainly, that she didn't want him to go out. She wanted to keep her baby at home. Her baby had trouble. He was different. He was not fitting in well. And she just wanted to keep him. And part of him wanted to get away, but couldn't. There's where we see the selfishness as he experienced it. Let me be clear. People with Asperger's generally don't become killers. Most of them are very nice people. I know many of them. Clinically, personally, socially. They're not killers. This was a damaged individual, special ed kid, and he had more going on than just having Asperger's syndrome. Now to the most recent incident. This occurred at the Robb Elementary School in May of 2022. 18-year-old Salvador Ramos killed 19 children and 2 teachers. This is the most obvious incident where the severity of the described behaviors led to a notification, but no response. Torturing animals, wanting to rape and murder girls are signs of psychopathy, a psychopath. They're signs of killers, of arsonists.
Ramos would put cats in a plastic bag, suspend them inside, throw them at the ground, and throw them at people's houses. He threatened to rape and murder 19-year-old Amanda Robbins after she rejected his sexual advances. His Yubo account was reported by several people due to its graphic content and lewd threats, but was allowed back on the platform following a temporary ban.
He wanted retribution because he'd been made fun of at that school. And in his psychopathic mind, he plotted to do it. Before he did it, he shot his grandmother, who survived but may never be able to talk again. This is the person, I think, who was taking care of him. Psychopaths are very dangerous people. They're worse than sociopaths. Sociopaths are amoral. So are psychopaths. Sociopaths take advantage of you whenever they can. Victims of opportunity. Psychopaths plot carefully what they're going to do, and then they do it. We have now looked at 4 different incidents, all of them terrible. We've alluded to some of the characteristics of these people and the common threads: narcissism, psychopathy, alienation, being a misfit, having problems socially. I could go on and on about this. But these are characteristics that any mental health professional, and hopefully some law enforcement people, can pick up on, rather than sending the kid home from school. Are there treatments? Well, there are possible treatments if you do it early and effectively. And it usually involves intensive treatment for the child and family therapy. There are many different issues here, but learning disabilities don't necessarily lead to murder. Asperger's doesn't lead to murder, but these people were allowed to live their misfit lives as their anger built up, the rage built up, and they decided to get even. And you see how meticulously planned these things were. These were not spontaneous. They didn't occur at the drop of a hat. These were planned massacres. Why is this happening with increasing frequency now? There are numerous variables. From the psychiatric perspective, as a physician treating patients, it's very difficult to treat children because their parents are involved. There's no privacy, and the parents often obstruct the treatment. They don't want their child to have tests. They don't want their child to take medication, even if it's absolutely appropriate. They don't want schools telling them what to do. And because of the increasing leniency everywhere in our society, and because of the difficulty in forcing treatment, we have these outcomes. But again, these people, all of them, were known to schools, mental health professionals, and police authorities. Contact with all three. How many lives would have been saved if one of these people had been forced to be evaluated by a psychiatrist? People who are committed, they get angry very often. And very often, they didn't need to be committed. That's what I see. But today, the burden is always safety. If there's any thought of harming self or others, people will be certified for a period of time. But nothing happened with these four. Could they have been treated as young children? Potentially, yes. Could they have been treated at the time just before they killed people? No, far too late. Nothing correctable there. Some have said that violent video games and movies foster these developments in children. That's not correct. Other than what I've said so far, I think it's just the general tenor of increasing violence on the planet. You can't turn on the television without finding violence everywhere. The world is very small now. You get real-time opportunities to see horrible violence all over the world every day. And this becomes fascinating for certain predisposed individuals, and it becomes a trigger, and then that trigger gets pulled. The main takeaways here are that none of us are perfect people, and some have difficulties. And when those difficulties are found early on, they need to be addressed. And that some people who have certain characteristic behaviors or problems act up, the school counselor or the policeman needs to make sure that a follow-up, a proper follow-up is done, patient examined, and treatment provided when necessary. Thank you for joining me today. Our session is about over. If there is a topic you'd like me to address, please say so in the comments section. Because of the nature of our content, we may have difficulty becoming monetized, so please support our Patreon. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And please be on time for your next session with the Beverly Hills Shrink.